Well, after 5 weeks of hard hits and clutch plays, our Super Bowl is set in Tampa, Florida. It will be the Arizona Cardinals playing the Pittsburgh Steelers. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Maria Sorreo. I am joined today by Van Barbieri. Now, Van, you are our local football pro. Of course, worked with the great coach George Allen for many, many years. And I can just imagine what those Super Bowl conversations must have been like.
Well, first, I wasn't a pro. I was in the administration with Coach Allen.
Right. But you're our local pro.
Right. So, the local pro.
You're the local pro.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
You're the local pro. We're going to talk about that now. A little later in the show, we're going to go to Liz's kitchen, and she is actually going to whip up the #1 Super Bowl snack food. We'll let you guess what that is later. And we are in the heart of basketball season. We had a chance to catch up with the PV High girls basketball team who played at the Staples Center, and we're going to find out what that was like for them. And finally, one of our Clipper girls, well, she was a cheerleader for the Philadelphia Eagles, and of course the Eagles coming this close to making the Super Bowl again. Now, Van, let's jump right into it. We have the Arizona Cardinals who are playing the Pittsburgh Steelers. Arizona's never been. Pittsburgh, of course, has been 6 times and won 5. What will it take for Arizona to win that game?
Just play like they've been playing. You know, they cinched their division real early.
They did.
I mean, like halfway through the season, just about.
Right.
Then they lost 3 or 4 games, and it was probably a letdown. But they're a very good team, and Kurt Warner's a winner. He's won 1 Super Bowl, lost another one.
Yes.
This will be his 3rd one. So his vet, and plus they have Larry Fitzgerald.
Larry Fitzgerald, I want to talk about.
Which is probably, I think, the best receiver in football right now.
I agree, and I think that if you talk about difference makers, I think Troy Polamalu for Pittsburgh, of course, and Larry Fitzgerald. I mean, he is just playing, and you can see how happy and excited he is when he plays.
And he's a good guy.
He is a good guy.
You don't see, he's not out there showboating. He just plays. He keeps his mouth shut, and if it comes down to somebody covering him, Polamalu will not be able to cover him.
That is going to be the interesting matchup, of course.
I mean, but it can't be done. He's too quick for him.
Yeah, he's very fast.
But Polamalu has other things. He's rough and rugged, and he's always at the right place at the right time.
He is. Let's talk about the quarterbacks for a minute. You mentioned Kurt Warner won a Super Bowl. Ben Roethlisberger won a Super Bowl. One a little older, one a little younger. Let's talk about that matchup right there.
I don't think age will make any difference. Roethlisberger's been in the league, what now, 4 or 5 years? And that's long enough. Plus he's been to the Super Bowl. So he's a tested veteran.
Right. As John Madden says, when you play the game one time, you're not a rookie anymore. Right.
and Warner's probably going to the Hall of Fame, I think. I think this really cinched it for him. Warner's going to be pretty hard to beat. I don't know if he can win the game, but he's pretty tough. You
know, it's interesting talking about Kurt Warner because, you know, here everybody knows the story. You know, he worked in a grocery store. He was passed over by everybody, and he has got this leadership ability, though, that you can just see in his eyes. I remember when they were talking about, you know, do we go with Kurt Warner or Matt Leinart? And to me, it was a no-brainer. Kurt's just got this leadership ability, and he just, when he is on the field, he takes command of it.
I agree. Leinart came in as a cocky young kid.
He did, absolutely.
And, that was a no-brainer, as you say.
Yes.
Warner was the veteran, and he had to actually beat out Leinart, which I thought was not the right thing.
Yeah.
He should have been in it. Leinart should have had to beat him out.
He absolutely.
And that's not the way the coaches saw it, but they gave him a big contract, and the owners want to play where their money is.
Let's talk about those 2 coaches for a minute too. We've got Coach Wisenhunt, who was with Pittsburgh, you know, playing against the Pittsburgh coach now. This is going to be an interesting matchup too, because he knows a lot about this team, obviously.
Right. He's one of my closest friends is his agent.
Really?
In fact, he represents most of the Cardinal staff.
Wow.
And he told me when they first hired him, watch out for this guy. He's a good, young, tested coach. And he's a very meticulous, and he does his homework. And Tomlin does the same thing at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has not missed a beat.
Ever.
They've gone from Cowher to him, and before that it was Chuck Noll. So,
they've had long-term coaches there,
and that shows good ownership.
You know what I wondered about though is why did they not stick with Coach Wiz when they could have had the opportunity? Tomlin's great, I love him. He's proven himself, but it's interesting to me that they did go out of the family to get him.
Maybe he interviewed better.
Yeah,
you know,
never know.
Football's a funny thing.
Yes, it is, definitely.
Maybe there's a personality conflict. You don't know.
Could have
I don't know. Behind the scenes, there's a lot of dynamics.
A lot of stuff that goes on that we don't know about. You know, let's go back just for a second here to this season. I knew in the beginning of this 2008 season that it was going to be a weird year. And right away, of course, everybody makes their predictions, and it was Dallas in the NFC and San Diego in the AFC. And I was at training camp with the Cowboys, and being the diehard fan that I am, I still could watch it and think, you know, there's some things that weren't quite right to me watching. And the same with the Chargers. I thought, you know, they're dominant and everything, but I just didn't see that, maybe that one special thing it was going to take for them to get there. Why do people make predictions before they play one down of football in this game?
They're going on the previous year's performance.
It drives me
that's
crazy.
any sport. They'll pick the previous year's winner to win the following year. And San Diego, you know, they should have did better than they did.
They should have.
Yeah,
But with LaDainian Tomlinson on the bench so much of the time, it was impossible.
But they had a lot of good offensive weapons.
They did.
And
That's
Tomlinson
true.
was hurt, but he was there. They shouldn't have been 8-8.
Right.
Let's put it this way. They should have been maybe 10-6.
Right.
And they lost a couple of close games.
They did.
But they come on at the end and they won. And Norv Turner did a good job at the end.
You know, I think he did, and I know that, you know, Jerry Rice has spoken out about Norv Turner not being a good head coach, you know, and he's been everywhere, and he was such a dynamic coach when he was with Dallas, of course, assistant coaching. It's interesting to go from a coordinator to a head coach and have the players sort of look at you and not feel like you're a head coach material, maybe, or...
Well, his personality is not a rah-rah.
He's not.
He's a very, very nice guy.
Very low-key.
I've known Norv since, I guess, the late 70s when he was at USC. He was recruiting out in this area.
Wow.
And he's not rah-rah, but he's a good X and O's guy. And somebody likes him because he's had about, 3 or 4 head coaching jobs.
One
He'll
right
get
after
fired
the
and
other,
go,
yes.
Yeah. So he's just a good guy. And but sometimes good guys don't win all the time.
Well, and, you know, this year, of course, we've had, you know, Black Monday happens, and that's the Monday after the regular season ends. And, of course, all the coaches that, you know, the Rod Marinellis and the people that, you know, they fire you. Basically, that's what Black Monday is. This year, some of them understandable, but to wait in the case of Coach Gruden was strange to me. Mike Shanahan as well.
Right.
You know, to wait till after that time was over. What is the thought process with owners, do you think, when that happens?
Somebody gets their ear.
Yeah.
Or they have the process in the wings waiting to go.
Mm-hmm.
Tampa, for example, I mean, they were 9-3.
Right.
They should have been a complete lock.
They should have been a lock.
And you know, the bottom line is they blew it.
Yeah.
So somebody has to take the fall. And I think the players quit on Coach Gruden at those last 4 games. Especially on defense. When Monty Kiffin left, everything fell apart. They weren't tackling. There was no pass coverage.
Right.
And you can't fire 10 players. You've got to fire the coach. It's the same old story.
Well, you're hired to be fired, right? Yeah.
That's right.
Exactly.
And that's the way it goes.
You know, and in the case of Shanahan, I guess just because he was there for so long and so successful, I guess I would have thought that maybe, you know, the owner would have come to him and say, please retire, please resign. To be fired that way was a little bit shocking. I know the team was struggling this year, but that's difficult.
Well, I'll tell you, in both cases, the Suns have taken over.
Interesting.
Lamar Hunt passed away a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Mr. Glazer passed away, I think, last year. Mm-hmm. His sons took over. Lamar Hunt's sons took over Kansas City.
Yep. And
they have their own agendas. And I noticed one thing in the Phoenix game. Bill Bidwell, who's been a notoriously bad owner, they haven't won anything. True. At the end of the game, if you noticed, they gave him the trophy, and he kind of drifted off into the background. And his son took over and did all the speaking.
So
I
he
think
wants to be sort of the
that might have turned for the good if they put his son in charge, because they've had that franchise for 80 years.
Right. Yes.
And this is the first time they've done anything of note, especially in the Super Bowl.
I think Coach Whisenhunt has a good He's
so,
got a lock on his job for a little while. So
I think the son probably has a better grasp on things, and he might have a little bit better vision of what's going on. And I after looking at that post-game interview, I think it was pretty obvious he's the one in control.
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think that people kind of get their ears, and then, you know, things kind of filter in, and you just never know what happens.
Whereas Kansas City and Tampa, those two sons on both sides, they're obviously in control now. They fired 2 very, very good coaches. Both blew it at the end. I mean, let's be frank about it.
Right. No, you're
right.